Well, good afternoon, Chris. This is Dr. Chris Lowthert. And Chris and I have been having conversations now. Chris is a chiropractor, and Chris has been teaching and integrating German new medicine in his practice for well over a decade. And this method of approaching health and healing is something that is near and dear to Chris's heart and to mine. And I wanted to welcome everyone to part 3 of our series on German new medicine. And Chris, would you take the floor? And welcome.
Hey, good to see you again. Good to be back. The weeks are flying by.
They are.
But yeah, it's good to be back talking German new medicine with you.
Thank you.
I do have some slides prepared today, and I thought it would be best to start off with a very quick review. I found over the years of teaching German new medicine that repetition is a good way to go sometimes. And so it's always worth listening to the 5 biological laws as often as possible. And especially in the beginning stages of learning. And fortunately, at this time, we have plenty of resources at our fingertips to continue our studies after our this may be the first introduction people have to German new medicine. So there's plenty of opportunity to dive deep and start learning and experiencing the 5 biological laws. So with that said, Kathleen, I guess we can just get right into it, huh?
I think that sounds great. And I really appreciate your review of the 5 biological laws, Chris.
Excellent. Well, let's let's see if we got this technological stuff squared away today. we are definitely newbies at this, aren't we?
Well, you've taught me how to do it this morning.
Yeah. Well, how's that look on your end? Is that
I think it looks fabulous and beautiful colors.
Can I don't know about our videos. Is it covering up the slide?
No, it's great. It's all perfect.
Oh, really? Okay, good. So it's not covering up the slide at all. All
Not
right.
at all.
Excellent. I don't know why it's covering up mine, but let's hang on a second here. Let's just get right into it then, Kathleen.
Okay, take it away.
All
Chris.
right. So I really enjoy and love reading this quote by Dr. Hammer. The German new medicine is a new paradigm of medicine, but it's also a new paradigm of consciousness. It is the awareness that our organism possesses an inexhaustible creativity and remarkable self-healing capabilities. It is also the recognition that each cell of our body is endowed with this biological wisdom we share with all living creatures. Such a beautiful quote, and it really does get this whole process started with German new medicine and how it is a major paradigm shift in our thinking, in our view, our perception. So we look at disease now much differently. We begin really to deconstruct our belief of disease the moment we start to explore German new medicine. And that deconstruction period can last a while. It can be difficult at times because as we begin to deconstruct and look at some of the dogma that we hang on to when it comes to medicine, when it comes to disease, healing, uh, there's quite a bit there. Wouldn't you agree, Kathleen?
Yes, there is. And Chris, I know this is a kind of a little aside, but what strikes me here, and I think might help people to situate their own understanding of this process, is when I look at Dr. Hammer's uh, photograph, I can see this very soulful, this very present, very conscious, very kind, compassionate man before me. And then I look at you and I see that reflected back in you as well. And I look at myself and I see that within myself. And those are fundamental aspects of the healing, right? It's the we embody all of that, and it's reflected back, and it's so strongly reflected back in him, and it's strongly reflected back in you. And so by paying attention to those subtleties, we begin to understand German New Medicine even more on that very intuitive level. And I hope that's not too out of line to put
No,
that in there now.
that was beautiful, Kathleen. That's right. Yeah,
Thank you.
this is it. This is, you're right on with that. And yeah, you know, depending on our age, we may remember doctors of this character structure, let's say, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's many out there still today, right? But unfortunately, they're operating in a paradigm that is in conflict with their own instinctual nature, their true nature. And so it can be real difficult as we all, once we make this leap into this paradigm, it can get very difficult at times in that deconstruction that takes place. But the beautiful thing is that there's a deconstructing going on, but at the same time, there's a revealing of something that's already been there. We were born with it. We were born with these self-healing capabilities and this inexhaustible creativity. We were born with this. And so I think this is something that we, not only as practitioners, doctors, folks that are in the field and working with other people that are more aligned with this paradigm of self-healing, it's a wonderful way of looking at us also as parents, as we're going to get into, as people that are looking after our children. And yeah, it's the watching it and observing a child go through a biological conflict experience and knowing exactly what that child's going through at that moment. And then once the child goes into healing, and the symptoms, the discomfort, the pain, the inflammation that often comes with healing, and the severity of those symptoms are going to be directly related to the intensity of the preceding conflict and the duration of that conflict active phase. And so we as parents, as adults that are with children, including our teachers, when we have this view and this awareness of the biological conflict experience, we see exactly what we were born with. We see this creative response to the conflict through the child's worldview, through the child's lens. And then we can see the creativity that arises during the healing phase for not only the child, but also the parent, guardian, because it's a difficult time. Healing is difficult at times. And so there's this creativity on how we manage sometimes these difficult situations. And so oftentimes the most simple and common sense approaches to healing are extremely helpful, extremely supportive, with almost instantaneous decrease of symptoms. It's amazing to watch and observe and participate in. And so, yeah, it's this inexhaustible creativity fits with this highly subjective biological conflict experience that is part of our lives, part of our existence here in this world, right?
Yes, and Chris, isn't it interesting, because from the beginning of time, from the beginning of our creation, we have possessed our body. We have possessed this capacity to heal, which is what Dr. Helmer stated, and what we know, what we see. And yet we have been taught to rather than embrace that and take that forward in a very empowering way, we give that power up and we bring someone else in to do the healing for us. And so here we're learning through German New Medicine just how capable we can be, we are, to be able to stand in the midst of the symptoms and learn how to embrace and take that whole healing process forward without putting it in the hands of someone else, and not outside authority.
Sure. And at the same time, use the people around us, our family, our friends, that are aligned with our choice to self-heal, and often sometimes lean on them, lean on them for the support.
Yeah.
If you're in a severe healing situation where you're experiencing a lot of fatigue, a lot of night sweats, fever, we have an appetite in the healing phase. The appetite, we lose our appetite when we're in that preceding conflict active phase. We lose it. We're not interested in eating. But once we go into the healing phase, that appetite returns, right? But sometimes we just don't feel like making our own food, And so how wonderful is it, you're laying on the couch, all bundled up, you got the sweats and the shivers going, and your little hubby makes you a chicken noodle soup, the best kind. How good that feels. you know
Very fine.
so ask for that help. Sometimes we may have to ask for it, but if you find yourself fortunate enough to have supportive partners and parents whatever. But I always thought about that when I was, young. Chicken noodle soup on grandma's couch watching TV. Yeah, maybe no more TV these day and age, but
Really?
but at least we were distracted, we distract ourselves. So
Yeah.
we sometimes need support. And again, it's if the severe healing. Let's talk cancer. Let's talk cancer. The severe interductal breast cancer that is inflamed, and it just takes so much of your capacity, your vital energy to just sustain the mindset that this is healing, this is healing. How wonderful it can be that to have a team of people support you
Yeah.
by, cleaning the dishes and the making the food, and spent just sitting time next to you when you're in the bed, giving foot massages. It's just it's again the ability to support the natural biological laws is inexhaustible. It's
Mhm.
it's all there. Um, so yeah, I don't know how we got off on this. It's just that support. You're not doing it by yourself.
Yeah.
Yes, the body's healing on its own, and your psyche is driving this process subjectively, but it doesn't have to be by yourself. Hopefully it can be, but let's just be straight with this. A lot of the times, if you don't have a supportive husband or a wife or a partner, and you're doing something for your cancer that you firmly have confidence in, and they don't, there's most likely going to be some situations,
Yeah.
some disturbances, some disruptions in the natural healing. And this is where stress comes into play. Is, if you have a stressful marriage, and you add on, the stress of the symptoms, even though you're fully aware of German medicine, the stress of the symptoms, the stress at work, are you able to stay home and rest, and in that healing phase, get the needed rest that you need, get the needed nutrition that you need? Are you capable of doing that? But oftentimes, this is where a lot of the conflicts arise in one's life, right? Is within the family, within the workplace, right?
Yeah.
So again, it's this bigger picture, this macro view of all the potential biological conflict experiences human animals are having at this moment because of what we're going through collectively. You see that German New Medicine looks at that macro view, and you start to recognize the biological conflict experience. And it doesn't have to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if we can recognize our own biological experience, as you're saying, this is us. We can do this ourselves. We can work, go within, quiet down a bit. Look at the micro view, what's in my environment that I have control over. What can I change in this moment where my hands are cold? I'm not sleeping at night. I'm waking up around 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and the first thing that's buzzing in my head is this situation at work. Do I stay and work and stay employed, or do I leave because of bop, 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 right? I'll leave the blanks. So this is this could be this is a biological conflict experience for that individual. And then now the resolution is going to have to be worked out in order for them to get through it. And so our biology supports us in that. And that's where we discussed that there's going to be organ changes that take place. There's going to be changes at the organ level that occur to assist us in coming to resolution with this, okay? And so we can look at the job experience, recognize that it's causing a conflict for me. It's pretty obvious. And then we focus on that situation, downgrade it as best we can through the different techniques and support that we have with just calming our nervous system down. Go into try to find a practical resolution. It's going to be highly subjective, but oftentimes if we start to just switch our perception just a little bit, just a little twist here, turn here, and we start to look at things a little differently, we start to tap into that creativity on how to navigate in the self-guiding powers of this whole biological experience is right there. You feel it, you're in it, right?
I wanted to just say I came up with through a friend of mine this concept of, and I go into posture of being an anthropologist from Venus, and as a man, an anthropologist from Mars. The idea being to step back, so I'm no longer coming from that I subject. I'm now stepping back, and I can see more of a macro picture, which is what you're saying German New Medicine is about, when we step back. And that does seem to help. It's like, instead of being a writer and writing in first person, I'm now an omniscient narrator. And I think that's part of what you're talking about there.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's again, you're in the experience. You're experiencing it in the most organic, natural way. Life experiences these biological conflicts. Right? I mean, it grounds us. It grounds us into the setting of our life. It grounds us into the setting of our life. It shows us firsthand that the source of our life gives us the edge. It gives us life, right? We don't have a life of our own. She gives us our life. So why wouldn't she give us this inexhaustible creativity of the special biological program to assist us in unexpected distress? And that there's this beautiful healing that takes place depending on what those changes at the organ level are. And as you can see here on this beautiful diagram, this is the compass of German New Medicine. If you print this diagram out and hang it on your refrigerator for the next few months, things will change in your life. Things will change in how you perceive life. And it's just a beautiful compass. But anyways, I think it'll be good if we can just speak about this here and show firsthand this, what the body does, and where you're, and how the body and how it behaves guides us to what's real, to what's really happening. Right. So you can see here on that we have this little wavy line. In the day phase is the sympathicatonia, and the night phase is vagatonia. So when we get up in the morning, whenever that may be, we begin to go into that day phase where our nervous system starts to increase. And then as the day goes on, then the nervous system starts to decrease. And, after 5 o'clock, oftentimes things start to slow down. And this is normaltonia. This is the normal day-night rhythm cycle that we've all experienced. Some of us have different cycles, but you can see how it's just a nice fluid wave. But then the DHS occurs, the DHS, which is Dirk Hammer syndrome in honor of Dr. Hammer's son. And this is the unexpected shock. This is the conflict shock. And we enter in the conflict active phase. And you can see here now, sympathicatonia is predominant. Our nervous system is increased. Our hands and extremities, feet and hands become cold. We lose our appetite. We have trouble sleeping. We're preoccupied with the event. At that time, depending on what area of the brain is involved, it's going to determine what goes on, what takes place at the organ level. You see that? So we have the color scheme of German New Medicine here. And we can see that the brain stem is also considered the old brain. It's firmly anchored in the embryology, the science of embryology here. So really, it's what first develops in this growth phase, right? So that was something I didn't really speak much about in our first two talks, is that Dr. Hammer used a lot of the science of embryology to explain what takes place at the organ level and how it's represented in the brain. So you could see here that brainstem controls areas of the body that are related to our respiration, digestion, and reproduction. And in that moment of conflict active, there's going to be increased cell growth, augmentation, cell proliferation. There's going to be a tumor that forms. And depending on the intensity and the duration of this conflict active phase is going to determine how large that tumor gets. Once you resolve that conflict, say a death fright conflict, then you go into the healing phase. First phase is the A phase. And this is where a lot of the inflammation builds, okay? A lot of inflammation builds during the first part of healing. This could be the most intense part of healing. A lot of pain, discomfort. But one thing, as I said earlier, our appetite returns. So we'll feel a shift in our appetite. Now we're starting to crave certain things. We get hungry again. And it's important to know this, particularly of this certain program that are controlled by the brainstem, is not only is our appetite going to return, but we're also going to have night sweats. We're going to experience night sweats. These are the sweats. It's not the hot flashes that women get during changes of into menopause, but these are when you wake up and your shirt is really wet. The sheets are very wet. You're sweating, but you got, the shivers a little bit. You got a fever. What's happening is there's actually tumor breakdown occurring. The tumor whose purpose was to absorb more oxygen during the death fright in the conflict active phase is now breaking down. And that breakdown process is assisted and actually is it's not assisting, it's actually doing the breakdown. The breakdown is actually tuberculosis. The microbacteria is actually doing the tumor breakdown, and it will decompose all that extra tissue that is no longer needed. And in that decomposing process, we're going to have night sweats. This is a key symptom that gives us a direction, gives us guidance as to what we're going through. Why the night sweats? The night sweats is because there's breakdown, there's tissue loss happening now, and we're losing protein. And so one of the most essential things somebody can do in this healing process, this healing phase, is to get adequate supply of protein. This isn't a time to be fasting. This isn't a time to be going through some detox program. This is a time to feed your body that essential protein that you are losing during this decomposing, this breakdown. Now, this breakdown could happen in the stomach, in the intestinal tract. It could be in our prostate. It could be in our lungs, which is often diagnosed as tuberculosis. It could be the breast gland tissue decomposing. And so there's a number of biological programs that it could be the kidneys, kidney collecting tubules that we talked just a little bit about. When we're retaining water, when the human animal and other animals go through an existence conflict or an abandonment conflict, a refugee conflict, as Dr. Hammer called, there's different aspects to this conflict. But when our life is at stake and we're having an existence conflict, or our loved one is held away from us and they're not able to see their loved ones, they're hospitalized without any visitors, they can have an abandonment conflict, an existence conflict, and they'll retain water. They'll blow up with fluid. We see this in the hospital setting all the time. And that increased water is the conflict active phase. But once that existence conflict is resolved, we immediately start urinating that extra water, but in the kidneys, the tumor is decomposing. And we'll have the night sweats. So in this particular situation, this existence, because I could say, I know we've all experienced this conflict at one point in time. Mm-hmm. And we start feeling that water retention. Our rings are feeling a little tight around our fingers, or we see our sock line around our ankles, right? But we don't have any symptoms. Sometimes the symptoms could be just a little sweaty, right? But one of the keys that when we first go to the bathroom in the morning, our urine's going to be cloudy. So when we have cloudy urine in the morning, oftentimes that's not because we didn't drink enough water, but that we're going through the healing process of an existence conflict. And we may have those sweaty, shirt, or the sweaty, pillow. And this, again, this is the feedback that we get from the body. So that was a little bit more of what's going on at the organ level and how the brain is involved here. And you can see it here with the diagram. And then we can see what happens when the other areas of the brain are involved, like the cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex is where the bronchial tubes and the bronchial mucosa is located. So when anybody experiences bronchitis, this is the area of the brain that's going to be involved. And bronchitis is often often or not, it's either a territorial fear conflict or territorial scare conflict, a scare or fright conflict. And so when that's conflict is experienced, now instead of cell growth in the healing, in the conflict active phase, we have meaningful cell loss, as you can see here in the conflict active phase. So when somebody experiences a territorial fear, which is fear within the home, within the workplace, within the school, when there's territorial fear, the cerebral cortex is involved, and there's the message from the brain to the body is to have tissue loss, cell loss, to help facilitate a resolution. And once that resolution comes and you enter into the healing phase, that meaningful cell loss now is resaturated, replenished. And in that replenishing process, we have the typical signs and symptoms of healing: inflammation, coughing now. And it sometimes could be productive or non-productive. It could be a barking cough, depending on what's involved. But we have a meaningful healing process that's going on that requires fluid. And unfortunately, sometimes it can get difficult breathing in this particular case. And that symptom of not being able to breathe or catch our breath can create more conflicts and could exacerbate or disrupt the natural healing that's going on. And so the power of German New Medicine, again, it eliminates the very common phenomenon that happens when the symptoms of healing arise. The symptoms themselves create another conflict, self-devaluation conflict that might affect the bones. It could be a stink conflict. Something smells, this stinks. That affects the nasal cavities and develops into sinusitis. Right? So there's these other conflicts that come about oftentimes because of the ignorance of the healing symptoms. But you can see that a territorial fear conflict or scare can get very complicated based on the environment. Right?
Chris, I have a
Yeah.
couple things that have come up in questions. So when we're in a situation where we are in the conflict stage, and then we move into the healing stage, how that resolution happens is, as you've said, very subjective. And I know my own experience with that was to very clearly write out what the conflict in my psyche, in my mind was. And as soon as I was able to distill it down into a very concise couple of statements, then the healing happened. And it's complicated to explain to others, and I've had questions based upon our previous conversations together. People wondering, how do they resolve that conflict stage? So my own personal experience was very clear, but can you give some examples of how people that you've seen have resolved that conflict to then be able to move into the healing phase, so that whether or not it's from the old part of the brain, as in the brain stem, or in the cerebral cortex, as in the new brain, how do people do that? Could you give some guidelines there? Because that's that demarcation of conflict versus resolution that puts us then into healing that's the nugget. That's the tipping point.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a couple things, again, I'm pretty certain that you said it. It's a highly subjective. The resolution is highly subjective. And depending on that person's background, depending on the tools that they have acquired in their life journey, it could be their spiritual outlook. All these factors come into play, right?
Mhm.
When faced with this is an existential situation. So as one moves through that experience, first they got to be aware that they're in conflict, right? Wouldn't you agree? They need to be aware first and foremost that they're in conflict.
Yes, definitely.
And some people have to face that. Some people may deny that, right? Maybe they have a really strong association with their their label, right? So there's a lot of factors that are involved here on how one gets to resolution. Dr. Hammer always has said that the most practical resolution is the most long lasting, right? So if we think of in practical terms, once you recognize that you're in the conflict and you know that this is your sympathetic nervous system is upregulated, what would be a common sense approach right off the bat, following recognition of being in conflict? If you have the ability, you may be in a conflict where you're going to stay conflict active for a period of time, a couple days, weeks, whatever it may be. And so it's like the office, working at an office space. All of a sudden you get the email, boom, hits you off guard, but yet you got to keep going back to work every day. So you're in it, right? So again, it's the awareness. The most important step is the awareness that one's in the conflict phase.
Mm-hmm.
That in itself begins to downgrade the situation right there and then, because you're accepting the fact, the great biological fact that you're in a biological conflict experience now. And so now you can really start to focus more on the resolution. And so there's a downgrading that naturally occurs with the awareness of the conflict. And then you can support that through whatever means that you find yourself innately, instinctively doing, like maybe just deep breathing, maybe going for a walk out in the woods, sit under a tree. Maybe it is journaling, writing it out, as you said, writing out the conflict. Maybe it is calling up your buddy and say, hey, man, can you come over for a quick talk? I got to talk to you about some things. And this is a buddy that you trust. He's going to be honest with you and he's going to be a straight shooter. You just get it off your chest. And then all of a sudden, he doesn't give you any advice. You just got it off your chest. And now you're focused on, okay, this is what I got to do. Do something. This is what I got to do. Maybe it's time now that I open up my own business. This is it. Boom, there's the resolution. Now, the moment they resolve the conflict, their body is going to go into a healing phase. And so the moment the healing phase arises, that individual now has an opportunity to be aware of the symptom and what it means. Okay? If he wakes up and all of a sudden his nose is all blocked up that next morning after he had a good talk with his buddy around the campfire that night before, and he wakes up with a stuffy nose. And he just had this new thing introduced to his mind a couple days ago on YouTube about a biological conflict experience and getting, going through it. And he wakes up with a stuffy nose. He might initially think, ah, man, I must have been allergic to that damn smoky fire. It got me all stuffed up. It got me. Or his attention might immediately go to, wait, I'm having an issue with my nasal cavity. This is how people start to think of sinuses. And I had a stink conflict. Something stinks. I can't believe this. This smells. This situation stinks. And so that guy there looked at that unexpected email from his boss, give him the ultimatum, went through a couple days, had a talk with his buddy around the campfire, and then he goes into the healing, and it was just a stink conflict. It's just his nose. Right? But what about this, Kathleen? What if this gentleman wasn't having a stink conflict, and we don't know this when we're in the conflict active phase, other than there's some biological programs that do have symptoms in the conflict active phase. And one of these symptoms is sharp stabbing chest pain. Sharp stabbing chest pain. That's a conflict active experience that involves the coronary arteries of the heart. And that individual, that male, let's just say, is going through a territorial loss conflict. And that letter, that email from the boss is being perceived subconsciously now as a territorial loss conflict. One of the things that you have to be aware of when certain programs are running, it's sometimes not the best thing to resolve the conflict. And so this gentleman, now that's having sharp, intense chest pain, best thing for him to do is start to calm things down by downgrading, as we talked about, recognizing that the sharp chest pain is an indication that they're conflict active, and begin to just kind of chill it out, slow it down a bit, right? Slow it down, because what's in store during the healing phase is a heart attack in the healing phase. The epileptic crisis of a coronary artery program is a heart attack. And depending on, again, the intensity and severity of this conflict active phase that this gentleman's going through, that has active symptoms, let's say, this is the big difference here. Once he goes into healing, he's going to have to be prepared to go through a heart attack. And so I bring this up because I think I've mentioned it in the past conversations that yes, conflict resolution is important, but it may not be the first thing we go for when we're in it, right? We may not be able to practically resolve a conflict, but that doesn't preclude us from getting busy with downgrading, right? So the downgrading process is something that should be more explored more for folks, right? I don't like using the word should, but I recommend this downgrading process versus focused on resolution. Yes, we want to get to resolution. Yes, we want to get it behind and finish the healing and stuff like that. But again, as I said, Dr. Hammer, there may be conflicts that we take to our grave. And in this current environment, this current state that we find ourselves in, it's not going to sometimes not be possible to resolve our conflicts. But does that put us in a bad position? No. No, we learn how to manage our conflicts now. And this gets into the subject for folks that are starting to get a little bit more curious about German medicine. I would start to explore what Dr. Hammer calls schizophrenic constellations. There's a whole section on learninggnm.com that has a heading of schizophrenic constellations. And this is the part of German New Medicine that explains mood disorders, anxiety, compulsive behaviors, depression. And these symptoms that we've all experienced are linked to the biological conflict experience. And so I bring this up, Kathleen, as a way of, again, not pushing aside the conflict resolution, but explore what happens when we have multiple conflicts that are active, in the beauty that begins to arise in that we call schizophrenic constellation. This is where the vein of German medicine gets really deep into the psyche. It just will blow us away. And I plan on having more conversation about and get little schizophrenic on you. But again, so once you know about constellations, you again start to look at the conflict resolution a little differently. So I don't know if that answers the question. That kind of reiterated a few things I've said in the past, but maybe that kind of brought some loose ends together.
Well, it does, Chris, and I think it helps really put some clarity on the embracing of the conflict portion of what is happening within our psyche, within our mind, within our body, so that rather than being afraid of that process, that part of the process, but to really embrace it and learn about it, and become so familiar with it that we become completely one with it, so that we can, as you say, downgrade it, we can dismantle it, but we can own it as a part of the inherent healing process. And it's not to be afraid of, but it's to understand it, so that we can then move into a supportive healing phase. Would you say that would be accurate?
Absolutely. It frames it in this natural setting, world setting that we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
In such a beautiful way, because our animals experience the same territorial fear conflicts, the abandonment conflicts, the separation conflicts, right? Now, I name some of these conflicts, and we hear these conflicts, right? Like separation conflict, indigestible morsel conflict, existence conflict, abandonment conflict. And sometimes early on, our attention immediately goes to that feeling of abandonment, right? Feeling abandoned, feeling isolated. We could be having a biological conflict at that time, but it won't be until the healing phase that comes about that confirms that we're having a genuine biological abandonment conflict. Okay? There's a distinction here. And I think it's important that this distinction is made, because there is an emotional component to it, but we got to stay firmly tied to what makes a biological conflict, right? The unexpected distress and the subjective nature of it, right? Comes out of, catches us off guard. We may go through our day and feel like we're isolated, but doesn't mean that we are in that biological program, you see? So one of the things that we can do in this learning process now is to use the symptoms to guide us back to that emotional component, separation conflict, abandonment conflict, because the symptoms confirm that, right?
Right.
Versus,
They're the roadmap.
right, versus going from the the conflict theme, the emotional theme, back to the symptoms, right? So you have to, you see what I'm saying? You have to develop a cough or a cough to say that I had a territorial fear conflict versus, well, I was real scared the other day. I felt really scared or fearful that something was going to happen, but that was just a psychological, I wouldn't even say psychological, but an emotional intensity that we sometimes feel emphatically, right? Because our empathy, we feel that. But this isn't a biological conflict. So the downgrading, as we were saying, is going to be, you're going to confirm the necessity, the being aware that you're in conflict active is based on those symptoms that we can, very palpably feel, right? And let them, guide you to where you're at in the process, downgrade it within the natural setting, because as I said earlier, our animals feel separated from us at times. But if your animal doesn't have a skin condition, then there wasn't a separation issue. But if your pet dog has a skin condition, it's likely, very likely, 100% likely, sure, that it's having a separation conflict. You see? So I just wanted to kind of close up on that, because I knew I was going somewhere with our empathy for our non-human animals, and that we share these biological programs with them.
So Chris, you can probably tell that I just have to ask you a question.
Yeah, good.
Okay, so I want to be very pragmatic here and put this to you. So if our animal is having a skin condition, and I'm gonna show you, my animal has a skin condition, and this animal is on 100% organic diet, and I'm trying to figure out how to resolve that. Is that something that you can even guide, or where do we go from there?
Oh yeah, this is good. Yeah, I like
So I
this.
mean, we can use homeopathy, we can use, we can take things out of the food, but how do we deal with this separation conflict with our animal? I mean, this animal is pretty much always here.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to understand that, since you brought that up and it was so poignantly
Yeah.
specific to my life. I'd love to hear, because I know skin issues are one of the main issues that dogs suffer.
Sure. Yeah. 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 So who are we talking about there in the
This is
background?
Rose. She adopted me a year ago, and
Oh, uh-huh.
three weeks later, she gave birth to 8 puppies.
Oh. So you still have the 8 puppies?
I found homes for them, thankfully.
Oh, okay.
Nine dogs for a cat family was a little much, but it was, I had separation anxiety conflicts saying goodbye to each one.
Sure. Okay. So you see, yeah. There's a little different feel to that, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, yeah. You weren't in a biological conflict per se, right?
No.
It was more an anxious feeling, uncomfortable feeling,
Yeah, it was very sad.
sad. Yep, yep. So Rose developed the skin condition when? That would be my first question.
She, well, actually, I thought that perhaps it was the diet that I was feeding her, because it would probably be just a little bit before she gave birth. So within a couple of weeks of coming into my home,
Okay. And where was Rose before that?
running down a hot highway.
Oh,
Yeah, she was left just out in the wilderness land in the
hmm,
3 month,
hmm.
3 week, halfway through her pregnancy,
Okay.
abandoned.
Sure. Yeah. 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 And that's all you know about what she was experiencing before that you met her? Okay.
That's right.
Okay. Hmm. So what kind of what scenario can you see in this situation? Like how would so she developed the skin condition shortly after she arrived with you, right? And shortly after she gave birth, right?
Mhm.
Tell me what kind of scenario comes to mind that would create a separation conflict for Rose.
Well, I would think that having to give up her puppies would spur that on. And over a period of 9 months, I placed various puppies, generally two at a time, into households. And the last two were with me for 9 months. And she sees many of the pups on a regular basis, but not all of them.
Okay.
And her the itchiness seems to come in more extreme periods of time and lessens at various other times. I thought perhaps it was food related, but I hadn't really focused on the abandonment of her puppies. But she was very close, and perhaps even when she sees some of her puppies, she's very close with them, and they play and they kiss. And
Mhm.
perhaps the this itching becomes more extreme after they part. So I'm wondering
Here we go. Here we go. This
if
is good.
maybe that's part of that.
Mhm, mhm. So, do you know if this was her first litter of puppies?
No, I think she was used as a brood dog,
No.
because there were two golden lab puppies about 4 months old that had been dropped about 10 miles to the east. And I believe that's where she was running. She was running east, and I found out about them, but they had already been picked up and placed. So we never,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
So I would say she's experienced a separation conflict a number of times.
Mhm.
So this separation conflict is very her psyche, her biological psyche is very vulnerable to separation conflicts.
Uh-huh. That
And
makes
it
sense.
often is separation from the offspring.
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
And here we have brood dogs on a regular basis, and the idea of having puppies birthed and separated and taken elsewhere is a common affliction that our dogs are forced into. And we wonder why there's so much uh, difficulty with healing skin issues, when really, as you're saying, through German new medicine, it's an emotional issue.
It's a biological, emotional issue, and it's based on the really the function of our skin. The function of our skin is touch, sensitivity to touch. And so when the animal, non-human animal and human animal alike, experience that unexpected distress of not being touched anymore,
Mm.
this program easily is activated.
Wow.
It's
Interesting.
very, very common, and we see it with our infants. If the mother has a
Yes.
a normal birth in the hospital, oftentimes the child is taken away from the mother, and the mother's prohibited from having natural touch, skin on skin touch.
Mhm.
And so this is an example of a scenario where that child, that baby infant, could develop skin condition
Wow. Wow.
very early on in childhood.
Wow.
How common? I mean, this is very common, right? I mean,
Yes.
very common.
Yes. And sleep disturbances, the lack of touch, and yeah.
Sure, the sleep disturbances is part of it. So we start to, again, frame the symptoms, and I want to just be real clear. We're framing it in a biological fashion, and there is an emotional component, but it's not the I want to just, because yes, you mentioned that Rose may have feel abandoned from her puppies, but she didn't biologically feel abandoned. She felt a separation. She biologically felt this separation. The puppies were torn from her
Mhm.
touch, torn from her skin.
Mhm.
And the symptoms, the redness, the itchiness, the
Mhm.
irritable, that it looks angry, the skin's red, right?
Mhm.
That is the healing phase of a separation conflict. And that healing phase could be disrupted by coming in contact again with, in Rose's case, the puppies.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I want to say something that is very interesting that's just coming to mind in this scenario that we're talking. And then for you, it's
Yeah.
firsthand, is that another symptom that indicates that we are in a biological conflict experience and we subconsciously have perceived it as a separation conflict. We will experience short-term memory loss.
Oh, interesting.
Short-term memory loss
Mm.
is a symptom of the conflict activity of a separation conflict. Now, do you see the beauty there? How nature nurtures us through a distressful situation like a separation conflict.
Yeah.
We start to lose the memory of that being that we're separated from.
Mhm.
And so Rose most likely doesn't think about the puppies that she's separated from now, because she has a very comfortable life. She's not in that situation anymore that we suspect she was in. She don't have to go running looking for the puppies anymore. Where did they go?
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
Now she has a very nurturing, comfortable environment.
Mhm.
Biologically, she knows the puppies are gone. She goes through the separation healing and the program completes itself. All at the same time, you, with the nurturing, loving, compassionate vibe you give her,
Mhm.
can be giving the food with just a slight different intention now.
Mhm. Mhm.
Not paying much attention to, is this the food? Is this food causing the skin condition? Is this the right stuff to be giving Rose?
Uh,
Is this
uh-huh.
causing it to irritate? Because I've learned that certain foods increase inflammation, and you see all these associations start to uh, cloud, I would say, what could potentially be a very supportive, nurturing gesture, of helping somebody heal. And so for you, And this applies also to our, parents that are listening, and children. We keep bringing the children in here, but it's what's your intention behind that gesture of giving the food, right? Is there fear associated with the food? Or do you instinctively know that that child loves eating this food, or that dog loves eating this food? It's feel good food. You're giving it, and then it has a different type of message. There's a different nonverbal message communicated there. You staying calm. You're not bringing in all these other extraneous ideas related to the reason why the symptom has arisen. You're fully embracing the biological experience, and you're using
Mm.
what's at your resources, like the herbs, like the homeopathy, but with a specific intention. And that intention is to support the natural healing that is already taking place. It's already happening, the natural healing. And you're a supportive agent by creating a loving, nurturing, caring environment.
Well, this is a very profoundly different and very profoundly deep method of or perspective on healing than I think maybe than I expected, because I mean it's simple in its in its outline of conflict resolution and the subjectivity of things, but we're really talking about how we approach. We're talking, if that is that not correct? I mean, we're talking
Sure.
about truly understanding that the body is in this spontaneous state of healing. It's giving us these symptoms to offset this sudden shock that has situated that we've been exposed to, something that we're really not able to avoid throughout life. I mean, most of us have some kind of unexpected shock, but our body is designed. Nature has designed this incredible human body that gives us the capacity to recognize and give us these symptoms that we then can respond to if we honor them, so that then our body can completely heal. I mean,
Right.
that's this absolutely beautifully creative and supportive and empowering process. I mean, it's really rather spectacular, don't you think?
Yeah, it's a methodology. It's a methodology, and we all bring our own unique flair, our own unique flavor to that methodology. But this is the methodology. These are the 5 biological laws. This is how these laws are observable in our own psyche, in our own body, and also observable in other people's psyche, in other people's bodies, in our animals, in our children. And so it is this act of observation that's important. Observing this, and that's where the learning really starts to, as you said, deepen, but then becomes body wisdom. And we begin to operate differently in the world, despite the increase in potentials of biological conflicts. And it's all here. It's all here in this active observation and recognition. But then it's also here within your family, within your friends, that if you have close people, right? And everybody's operating with this methodology. I mean, how beautiful.
Yeah.
And yet how it once was, right? But we're not going back there. We're here now, but we can bring, as we said in our first conversation together, bring some of this. I really, it's common sense how I look at this stuff, like with the healing, it's common sense. Simply, and this is why we can communicate this to children in a way that is so powerful that these children are not conditioned to fear disease, but are conditioned to embrace the natural healing symptoms that they sometimes experience.
Right.
It's just that quick.
And also to honor the body, to
Right.
really understand that it is so finely tuned to absolutely everything that we think and feel and do, everything we eat. It impacts us on the mitochondrial level, on the cellular level. We're turning on and we're turning off the healing process, or we're the conflict. We're actually we actually have that kind of influence upon ourselves. And so to understand and to really honor ourselves, because we are that finely equipped with the solution. The body is equipped with the solutions, but the abuse, as we abuse our body, we can overload the body in a way that can result in very catastrophic results. But if we are in sync with our body and the healing, we can heal from everything. Would you agree with that?
Sure, there's this balance. We're in balance, right? Coming back into balance.
Yeah.
You know, I do agree with that. It's our bodies and minds can take a lot, particularly our bodies, if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if we live in a toxic environment, a wasteland. It's toxic. We know this.
Yeah.
But yet there's a lot of highly functioning human animals getting shit done, right? Working, being creative, got the juice, you know, but yet we're surrounded by toxicity.
Yeah.
Right? We're surrounded by the mind toxic, the beliefs, right?
Yeah.
These toxic narratives that are running in the background of people's psyche subconsciously, because these toxic narratives is mind control. And they got these loops running of many people. And this is the brilliance. It's like samurai sword cutting through.
Yeah.
No fear of disease. The moment you grab that and rip it from the roots, out of your NLP, out of your psyche, out of your body, just rip it out, everything lightens up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yes, we're going to go through conflict experiences, but it's a lot lighter. And
Yeah.
I find it, yes, it gets uncomfortable, but sometimes there's a certain humor to it for me. I'm just speaking for myself because I'm living in my own psyche here. But, you know, when I go through a conflict experience sometimes and it manifests in certain ways, it's like, oh, really? Huh. Didn't really think that was bothering me that much, you know? Do I really got to look at this? It's just these subtle nudges now.
Yeah.
To the existential. In the moment you get it, and that act of observation happens and you recognize it, the symptoms disappear.
Yeah.
And then that's like, well, wait a minute. This German new medicine stuff is for real. This is real.
Yeah.
This is science. This is real science. It's reproducible evidence. And this is why they're afraid of it.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's reproducible in every single case.
Yeah.
You have to apply the methodology. You have to apply and look through the situation with the 5 biological laws. That's the rule. That's the only rule. You stay within this and you work from there, not discarding, not getting rid of anything that could be supportive potentially, but oftentimes just getting rid of these narratives.
Well,
These narratives.
the mind is king, right? I mean,
Right.
what we
Well,
allow our mind to do can release us, or it can entrap us.
well, our intelligence is what frees us, right? The mind is this mechanical
Mm.
part of us, right? But it's our living intelligence that is very powerful,
Yes, our
very powerful. And then it's learning how the mind works,
yeah,
right? That's
yes,
powerful. I get you on that. It's yes, it's the mind is mechanical, but it's very powerful. That's why the way the things are playing out
yes,
in the world scenario is how powerful the mind is and how mechanical it can be controlled, right?
yeah,
Versus what we're talking about here is this living intelligence that we breathe every moment of our day. Living intelligence. We're endowed with this intelligence, divinely endowed with this intelligence, and we breathe it every day with our source of life.
mhm,
And we recognize the natural setting that we find ourselves in. This is how we live. This is right.
mhm.
It nurtures our psyche, and it lightens the load.
Yes,
It lightens the load. The human biome, this microbiome is a catchy term that is put out there, right? This microbiome, it's 4 to 1. There's 4 to 1 microbes to our cells or natural cells. So the microbes are very prolific, let's just say, right? There's tons of microbes.
mhm.
And the human biome is an example of that, area of the body that is endowed with all these microbes. But now once we start thinking about German new medicine, and we know the beneficial roles of microbes, now we start to look at the human biome a little differently, right? We start to think about our human biome in a symbiotic relationship. Well, that new way of thinking might create a conflict,
Mhm.
might start creating a conflict in oneself. Now, wait a minute. Are you saying that all so-called diseases originate from an unexpected shock? Yep. And you're saying that all microbes are beneficial, they play a beneficial role in the healing? Yep, I'm saying that. So what about this toxic food? What about this environmental pollutant? What about bop, 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 bop? The list of toxins, right, is a mile long,
Mhm.
right? We can go through all the different narratives related to toxins, and we can start seeing each one of them played out in this potential conflict of German new medicine and then this toxic wasteland. And so in that process of deconstruction, we're going to get to this toxin issue. Like, how do we cope with this? How do we adapt to this? Let's say, how that adaptation, how do we adapt to toxins? How do we overcome this toxic wasteland that we find ourselves in? Well, again, we go first, let's go to the micro level. Let's not look so much out in the macro. Let's bring it into what we can control now. The manageable. We know what, oftentimes we know what we can eat, right? And we know that when you're making fresh greens from the garden and you're eating good, wholesome food, you got a lot of vitality. You feel good, right? You having regular bowel movements. You're cranking it, right? Well, what commonly happens is that maybe you have a biological conflict experience, and now that symptom arises as diarrhea. We didn't know that there was a preceding issue going on. We didn't feel ourselves in I mean, we were eating good. We had a lot of vitality, but there was something that happened that created the biological program to be activated in the small intestine to give me diarrhea the next morning, right? So immediately our attention goes and our memory goes back, like, what happened previously? And oftentimes, the more you hone it, it comes like bing, bing, there it is. It was that email. That was that comment from my spouse, or a comment from a coworker. It wasn't some big hoop-de-doo distressful situation. It was just that subtle comment that caught you off guard, and your subconscious perceived it as an indigestible anger, and you resolved it oftentimes by just going to bed and, letting it go. Some people just let things go at night and they go to bed, they fall asleep, but you wake up with diarrhea and you're wondering, okay, is it the food? Did I eat something? You see? And then it's like, wait a minute, I'm eating wholesome food. It's good food. So there's another explanation that we see that's going in play here. Now, if one is eating toxic food, you can be assured that their vitality is going to be pretty low. It's common sense, right? If that person has a lifestyle on top of that isn't aligned with wholesome, holistic approach to life, right? Their vitality is going to be low. That person, when they experience a conflict shock, is going to be in a different situation versus the other person who has that wholesome lifestyle, eating good, right? Just like they went to bed and they woke up and just had diarrhea, no big deal, right? Versus this other person that has a toxic lifestyle and all the toxic narratives running, they're going to be more susceptible to the biological conflict, and they're going to be more susceptible to not making it through the healing phase that's going to come after it.
Yeah, because they're not understanding the basic elements of how to honor the body's natural healing process.
Honor the body, period. And honor the body, period.
Right. So the complications of trying to peel the layers off the onion to understand why they're feeling so terribly is perhaps beyond their reach.
Sure. Well, there's millions. Yeah. But there's some that there's a lot that it's in our reach, right? So once
Yes.
you hear this medicine, you hear the biological laws, and you see, you reflect on the lifestyle that you're leading and living and emulating, you don't get rid of that. You continue to do it, but you're going to do it now in a different fashion, a different style, right? And you're not going to be, it's not going to be in the victim mindset of the conflict experience, right? The biological conflict experience. You're going to have a conflict experience. You know the work, you get to work with the method, whatever that method, how that method looks, and you get to work, you get it done, you close the program, you go on.
Wow. Well, Chris, we probably are needing to draw this series, part of the series, to a close, so part 3. I'd like you to maybe do a quick summary, and then the next part 4, we'll pick up from here and go onward. But this has been absolutely fascinating, as each of these parts have been. So if you could maybe do a bit of a summary for us, please.
Sure. Yeah, we touched on some new aspects to the work, I think, today.
Mhm.
And we kind of gently have moved into some subject matters that often arise when German New Medicine now has center stage, right? So when German New Medicine and the biological laws have been defined, and there's been instruction with those, what those laws are, now what do we do? Now, what do I do when I have these conflict experiences? And as we said, the first is being having that awareness now, the attention to recognize the conflict experience for what it truly is. It's a biological phenomenon that we all experience at one point in time in nature. And then it's the awareness of what the symptoms mean and how they guide us. It's part of the symptoms, the natural healing symptoms, or even the symptoms in the conflict active phase, as I spoke about earlier, the stabbing chest pain. Those symptoms are part of our self-guiding capacity to give us an upper hand, to give us the edge to get through whatever we're going through. And so it's a view of life, that we're working with here now. And we touched a little bit on, and I know this is something that we can explore even further, but we touched upon toxicity and how our relationship with toxicity now starts to shift. And maybe we are a little deficient in a certain area of our, let's say, lifestyle. Maybe we're not getting enough exercise, or we're eating some foods that we know may not be the best kind of foods, but we have a different relationship now. We start to build on a relationship where the fear of disease now has been ripped out, and there's a more of a functional relationship, but it has to stay functional, not dysfunctional. Right? If an example of a dysfunction would be spending your whole day worrying about toxicity. Am I being poisoned? Am I around somebody that is poisoning me? Is such and such a poison? Or, it sounds like there's a compulsive behavior here going on that may be connected to some biological program, right? We can explore that route versus staying in that fear mode, which it really is. It's fear of disease.
Mhm.
And so we simply start cleaning up our lifestyle. It's pretty common. That's a common sense approach to what we can do, and recognize and acknowledge that there's certain parts of our lifestyle that's deficient, and we work on it. We take steps to work on it, and we keep the ones that are, that can be fit into this method of self-care and healing, and run with it to see where that goes, right? So you got your herbal medicine, and you just bring it on over and plop it down and start running with this now. It's the relationship we have with the toxins that is more powerful and more, it puts us more in an advantageous situation.
Mhm.
So the top, we can definitely bring up this, what do we do? What can we do? And I mean, real quickly, what can we do? Can we detox now? Well, as I said earlier, you don't want to be detoxing while you're going through a biological program where the symptoms are real intense and you're losing protein.
Yeah.
That would be counterindicative. You would not want to do that, but say, for example, you have a good lifestyle, you're cranking out the creativity, you're working, you're raising kids, you're doing all kinds of, and you come into the fall months getting ready for winter and you're feeling, I think it's time to do a little detox.
Mhm.
Everything's good, I'm feeling good, let's give it a run, right? Go for it. And I would suggest you go for it, maybe with the intention that you, in that detox, you get rid of some of the mind parasites that are affecting your ability to fall right in line with German New Medicine, fall right in line with the biological laws, and get cranking
Yeah.
and keep it cranking. So there's a place and time for our detoxing, but let's not get too preoccupied with it, because it could be a compulsive behavior that's explained by the schizophrenic constellations as described by Dr. Hammer. And we can, there's some work there that can be done. Might calm it down just a little bit. Take care of the things that you can have control over, that's in your reach. Grab that next rung on the ladder that's in reach. Don't try to grab 10 rungs up, just go for the next one up and just keep on climbing the ladder. But do something, that's what I keep saying. Do something.
Yeah.
So there's a place and time for our self-healing, our self-care. And I hope that kind of explains it. And I think if later on we delve deeper into this subject, I would be happy to. And then lastly, just one thing with the children that I want to leave with, it's this modeling the parents. If the parent, obviously parents are probably watching this, kids maybe, you might have a little guy that's interested in German New Medicine and is intrigued about biology and this and that. And so you can learn it together, but the parents begin to model this method first and foremost, and then that passes on to the child. And it's a model that's free from the fear of disease. Fear of disease is no longer within that environment, and you'll be surprised how quickly our children heal and bounce back once the parents got the navigational parameters set. So that's all I had on my part, Kathleen. This was
Wow.
good.
Well, we actually ran out of time, and I'm eager to go into our next part next time. And thank you, Chris, as always. This is just so enlightening, and I'm very grateful to you for bringing this forward for us.
Well, it was great having the conversation again, and I look forward to our next one.
Me too. You have a lovely week.
Thank you. You too, Kathleen.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.